When CEO Vivian Hartwell cornered analyst Ethan Cole in a locked bathroom at the company holiday party, he was certain his career was over. 6 months of mistakes, missed deadlines, and barely concealed exhaustion had finally caught up with him. But as she stepped closer, her expensive perfume mixing with the scent of his fierce sweat, she whispered 7 words that would change everything. "I know exactly what you're going through." What happened next wasn't a termination. It was something far more dangerous, far more intimate, and far more life-changing than Ethan could have ever imagined. If you want to know how a single conversation in a bathroom transformed 2 lives and revolutionized an entire company, stay until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights in the bathroom flickered once, then held steady, casting harsh shadows across Vivian Hartwell's face as she turned the lock with a decisive click. Ethan Cole's heart hammered against his ribs so hard he was certain she could hear it. This was it. 6 months of barely holding it together, and it was all going to end here, in a women's bathroom at the company holiday party, with the muffled sound of Jingle Bell Rock bleeding through the walls. "Ms. Hartwell, he started, but she raised one perfectly manicured hand. "Don't," she said quietly. "Not yet." Ethan's mouth went dry. He'd been rehearsing his defense for weeks, preparing for the inevitable confrontation about his performance. The missed deadline on the Sanderson account, the typo-riddled report he'd submitted at 3 in the morning, the presentation where he'd blanked on basic figures he should have known cold. But standing here now, trapped between the door and the CEO of Meridian Analytics, all his carefully constructed explanations evaporated like steam. Vivian Hartwell was 42, though she could have passed for 35. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe. She wore a charcoal dress that was simultaneously professional and devastating, paired with heels that brought her nearly to his eye level. Everything about her screamed power, control, precision. She'd taken over Meridian 6 months ago, almost to the day, and had immediately earned a reputation as the woman who didn't waste time or tolerate weakness. The tech industry press had dubbed her the executioner after she'd restructured 3 major companies in 5 years, leaving hundreds unemployed in her wake. Meridian's stock had jumped 17% the day her appointment was announced. The employees, however, had started updating their LinkedIn profiles. "Do you know why I asked you to step out of the party?" Vivian's voice was low, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. Ethan's hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets, hoping she wouldn't notice. "I assume it's about my performance." "Your performance," she repeated, and something flickered in her gray eyes. Not anger, something else he couldn't identify. "Tell me, Ethan, when did you last have a full night's sleep?" The question caught him off guard. What? "Sleep. 8 hours. When was the last time?" He blinked, trying to process the shift. This wasn't the conversation he'd expected. "I don't see how that's relevant to..." "Answer the question." There was no point in lying. "I don't know. 3 months? 4? Maybe." Vivian nodded slowly, as if he had just confirmed something she'd suspected. "And when did you last eat a meal that didn't come from a vending machine or a microwave?" "Ms. Hartwell, when, Ethan?" He felt something crack inside him, just a little. The careful facade he'd been maintaining, the performance of being fine, of being capable, of being someone who deserved to be here. "I had pizza last week. Does that count?" "Frozen or delivered?" "Frozen." "No, it doesn't count." She crossed her arms, and for a moment she looked almost tired. Not in the way he was tired, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion, but something older, something remembered. "What about your apartment? When did you last have friends over? When did you last do anything that wasn't work or survival?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, I don't understand what this has to do with anything. If you're going to fire me, just do it. Don't play games." "Fire you?" Vivian's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you think this is? Isn't it?" She was silent for a long moment, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he didn't. If this was the end, he'd face it head on. Finally, she spoke. 6 months ago, when I took this position, I requested the personnel files of every employee in the analytics division, 97 people. I read every performance review, every note, every evaluation going back 3 years. Do you know what I found in yours? Ethan's throat felt tight. That I'm underperforming. That you were exceptional. Her words landed like stones in still water. 2 years of flawless work, innovative solutions to complex problems, praise from every supervisor you've had, and then, she paused, letting the silence stretch. And then, about 6 months ago, it all started to slip. Small things at first. A missed meeting here, a delayed report there. Nothing catastrophic, but a pattern, a decline. He wanted to defend himself, to explain about Sarah leaving, about the money, about the apartment and the bills, and the constant grinding pressure of just trying to exist, but the words wouldn't come. I've been watching you, Ethan, Vivian's voice softened slightly. Not to catch you failing, to understand why you're failing. There's a difference. Something in his chest loosened, just fractionally. Why? Because I recognized the pattern. She moved closer, close enough that he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the slight tension in her jaw. I lived it. Before he could process that statement, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, but it buzzed again, and again. Vivian glanced down. You should check that. It's nothing. Check it. With trembling fingers, Ethan pulled out his phone. 3 alerts from his bank app. Insufficient funds. Transaction declined. Overdraft warning. His rent payment, the automatic payment that was supposed to go through tonight, had bounced. He had 3 days before his landlord started eviction proceedings. The bathroom tilted slightly. Ethan pressed his palm against the cool tile wall, fighting the wave of nausea that swept over him. How bad is it? Vivian asked quietly. He almost laughed. How bad? Where did he even start? 6 months earlier, Ethan Cole had been a different person. Not better necessarily, but different. More naive. More optimistic. More certain that life was something you could plan for, control, predict. He'd been with Sarah for 4 years. They'd met at a data science conference in Austin, both of them bored during a panel on predictive analytics, both of them sneaking out early to find actual food instead of conference center sandwiches. She was brilliant, funny, ambitious. She worked in fintech, made good money, had a clear trajectory for her career. They'd moved in together after a year, started saving for a wedding after 2, got engaged after 3. The ring had cost him 2 months' salary. Sarah said it was too much, but her eyes had lit up when she saw it, so he knew he'd chosen right. They'd had plans. A wedding in the spring, a house in the suburbs eventually maybe. Kids someday when they were both more established. It was all mapped out, comfortable, certain. Then Sarah met Marcus. Marcus was a venture capitalist. Marcus had a Tesla and a loft in the city and a vacation home in Aspen. Marcus didn't work the kind of hours Ethan worked. Marcus had time for weekend trips and spontaneous dinners and the kind of relationship Sarah apparently wanted instead. She told Ethan on a Tuesday. He remembered that detail with crystalline clarity. It was Tuesday around 7 in the evening, and he'd just gotten home from work. She was already packed, 2 suitcases by the door, her side of the closet empty. I need more, she said. Just that. I need more. More than what? More than him? More than the life they'd planned? More than 4 years of building something together? She took half their savings, which was fair technically, since it was a joint account. She took her half and he kept his half, except his half had to cover the security deposit on a new apartment because he couldn't afford their old place alone. And the furniture they'd bought together, which she didn't want. And the utilities that were still in his name, and the wedding deposits they'd already put down that were non-refundable. His half evaporated in 3 weeks. Then his landlord informed him that the building was being renovated, and his rent was going up 40%. He could pay it or move. Moving would cost money he didn't have. Paying it would cost money he also didn't have, but at least he wouldn't have to find a new place, so he paid it, which meant cutting everything else. No more gym membership. No more eating out. No more buying books or games or anything that wasn't strictly necessary. His grocery budget became whatever he could afford after rent, utilities, and loan payments, which turned out to be approximately $60 a week. $60 bought a lot of ramen, a lot of instant coffee, a lot of white bread and peanut butter, and the kind of pasta that came in boxes for 99 cents. It didn't buy vegetables, or fruit, or protein that wasn't processed into something shelf-stable. Ethan told himself it was temporary. He'd get a raise at his annual review. He'd pick up freelance work on the side. He'd figure it out. Then Vivian Hartwell became CEO. The announcement came via email on a Monday morning. Ethan had been at his desk, nursing his third cup of bad office coffee and trying to focus on a data model that refused to make sense. His eyes were gritty from lack of sleep. He'd stayed up until 2 working on a side project that he'd hoped would bring in a few hundred extra dollars, but the client had ghosted him after he'd submitted the work. Subject: Leadership Transition. Effective immediately. Ethan had clicked it open with the same dull dread he felt every time he saw an email from corporate. These messages were never good news. They were always budget cuts or restructuring or new protocols that made everyone's job harder. Dear Meridian Analytics team, we are pleased to announce that Vivian Hartwell will be joining us as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Ms. Hartwell brings over 15 years of executive experience in the technology sector, with a proven track record of operational excellence and strategic growth. The email went on for 3 more paragraphs, but Ethan stopped reading. He opened a new tab and searched for Vivian Hartwell. The results were not encouraging. Hartwell's heartless restructuring leaves hundreds. Jobless. The Executioner. How Vivian Hartwell turned around. 3 companies by cutting deep. New CEO's first 90 days. Who will survive? There were photos of her at conferences, at board meetings, at industry events. Always poised, always professional, always with that slight, knowing smile that suggested she could see 3 moves ahead of everyone else. "We're screwed," muttered James from the next cubicle over. He was one of the senior analysts, had been with Meridian for 8 years. "She's going to clean house. You watch." "Maybe it won't be that bad," offered Kelly, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's always that bad," James said. "Start updating your resumes." Ethan had gone home that night and stared at his own resume for 2 hours. What did he even have to offer? 2 years at Meridian, doing work that was increasingly sloppy and unreliable. A degree from a decent but not prestigious university. Skills that were solid but not exceptional. He imagined trying to find a new job in his current state, exhausted, broke, barely holding it together. He imagined interviews where they asked about his recent work, and he had to explain the mistakes, the missed deadlines, the decline. He imagined ending up unemployed, unable to pay rent, crashing on someone's couch, except he didn't have anyone whose couch he could crash on anymore. His parents were in Florida, retired on a fixed income. His sister had 3 kids and a mortgage in Ohio. His friends, the few he had left after Sarah took most of their social circle, were all struggling themselves. So he did what he'd been doing for months. He made another pot of coffee, ate another bowl of ramen, and worked until he couldn't keep his eyes open anymore. Vivian Hartwell's first week as CEO was like watching a hurricane make landfall. She didn't waste time with gentle introductions or building rapport. She scheduled one-on-one meetings with every department head, asked pointed questions, and took notes in a leather portfolio that never left her side. She walked the floors unannounced, observing, listening, cataloging. The layoff started on day 12. Accounting lost 3 people, HR lost 2, sales lost 5. Each dismissal was handled quietly, professionally, with severance packages that were generous enough to avoid lawsuits but not generous enough to soften the blow. The office atmosphere became toxic with anxiety. People stopped talking in the break room. Everyone worked later, hoping that visible effort would save them. The bathroom gossip, usually about weekend plans or relationship drama, turned to speculation about who was next. Ethan kept his head down and tried to become invisible. He arrived early, stayed late, and spoke only when spoken to. His work was still subpar. He knew that, felt the shame of it constantly, but he couldn't seem to fix it. His brain felt like it was running on dial-up in a fiber-optic world. Everything took longer. Nothing came easily. He made mistakes that 6 months ago would have been impossible. He transposed numbers in a financial projection. He submitted a report with a client's name spelled wrong 3 times. He missed a meeting because he'd written down the wrong time and then fallen asleep at his desk. Each error felt like another nail in his coffin. But Vivian didn't call him in. Didn't send the dreaded "please stop by my office" email. In fact, she barely seemed to notice him at all. Except sometimes, Ethan would look up from his desk and catch her watching him. Not obviously, she was too professional for that. But he'd glance toward the executive wing and she'd be there, standing at her office window, and their eyes would meet for just a second before she turned away. It happened enough times that he started to wonder if he was imagining it. Paranoia born of exhaustion and stress. His brain conjuring threats that didn't exist. He tried to eat more, sleep more, take care of himself. But his budget wouldn't stretch. His rent took 70% of his paycheck. Utilities took another 15%. His student loan payment took another 10%. That left 5% for everything else. Food, transportation, clothes, emergencies. There were no emergencies he could afford. He started losing weight. Not in a healthy way. In the way that happened when your body began consuming itself because there wasn't enough fuel. His clothes hung looser. His face developed hollows under the cheekbones. His hands shook sometimes, just a fine tremor he tried to hide. Kelly noticed. "Are you okay?" she asked one afternoon, her voice low and concerned. "Fine," Ethan said automatically. "Just tired." "You look like you haven't slept in a month." "Big project," he lied. There was no big project, there was just the constant, grinding effort to keep up with normal projects that used to be easy. Kelly touched his arm lightly. "If you need anything, I'm fine," he said, more sharply than he intended. Then, softer. "But thank you." She didn't ask again. Dammit. The holiday party was mandatory. That's what the email said. Attendance strongly encouraged, which in corporate speak meant be there or it goes in your file. Ethan almost didn't go. He had $12 in his checking account and wouldn't get paid for another 4 days. The party was being held at a hotel downtown, and while the company was covering food and drinks, he'd still need to get there. The bus was $3 each way, $6 to attend a party where he'd have to pretend everything was fine. But the email had said strongly encouraged, and he couldn't afford to give Vivian any more reasons to notice him in a negative way. So he put on his best shirt, which was getting loose now, the collar gaping slightly at his neck, and took the bus downtown. The hotel ballroom was exactly what he'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a bar with top-shelf liquor, and a DJ playing corporate-approved holiday music. The analytics division had claimed tables near the back, as far from the executive seating as possible. Ethan grabbed a glass of water. He didn't trust himself with alcohol on an empty stomach, and found a seat next to Kelly. "You made it," she said, smiling. She looked nice, dressed in a green cocktail dress that brought out her eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Mandatory fun," Ethan said, trying for humor. "The best kind." She gestured to the buffet tables, groaning under the weight of catered food. "At least the food's good. I've already had 3 plates." Ethan's stomach cramped at the thought of food, but he ignored it. He'd eat later once the crowd thinned and he could load up a plate without anyone watching. The party progressed the way these things always did. Speeches from executives, forced mingling, the gradual loosening of inhibitions as people hit the open bar. Ethan nursed his water and tried to look engaged while his mind ran calculations. If his rent bounced, he'd owe his landlord late fees plus the original amount. He'd have to pull together at least $2,000 in the next 72 hours or he'd be evicted. He had $12. "Ethan?" He looked up. Kelly was watching him with concern. "You zoned out. Are you sure you're okay?" "Yeah, just..." His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire world tilted. Alert. Insufficient funds. Alert. Transaction declined. Alert. Overdraft warning. His rent hadn't gone through. The automatic payment he'd set up months ago, the one that was supposed to save him from having to remember, had bounced because he'd miscalculated. He'd thought he had enough. He'd counted and recounted, and apparently he'd still gotten it wrong. "Ethan?" Kelly's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong?" He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. People at nearby tables glanced over. I have to..." He didn't finish the sentence. He just walked, headed for the exit, his heart pounding and his vision tunneling. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to figure out what the hell he was going to do because he was out of options and out of time and out of everything. He made it to the hallway outside the ballroom before a voice stopped him. Leaving so soon. Ethan turned. Vivian Hartwell stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She'd changed out of her usual work attire into something more festive but no less commanding, a deep burgundy dress that probably cost more than 3 months of his rent. Yes, I'm not feeling well. I see. She stepped closer. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Ethan's mind raced. This was it. She was going to fire him right now, in a hotel hallway at a holiday party. Because of course she was. Because his life had become such a complete disaster that even the firing would be humiliating. They walked in silence down a side corridor, away from the noise of the party. Vivian's heels clicked against the marble floor with metronomic precision. She stopped at a door marked with the universal symbol for a women's restroom, pushed it open, glanced inside to confirm it was empty, and gestured for him to enter. Ms. Hartwell, I don't think... Inside, Ethan. He went inside. She followed, locked the door behind them, and turned to face him. And that's when she said it. I know exactly what you're going through. Ethan stared at her, unable to process the words. What? The missed rent payment that just bounced? The $12 in your checking account? The instant noodles and black coffee diet? The panic attacks when you get an unexpected bill? The certainty that you're one mistake away from total collapse. Her voice was calm, clinical, like she was reading from a report. I know all of it because I lived all of it. How do you... I've been watching you, Ethan. Not to catch you failing, to understand why you're failing. She moved closer, and he could see something in her eyes that he'd never seen before. Not pity, but recognition. Understanding. 8 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. Different details, same nightmare. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but his throat had closed up. Vivian continued, her voice dropping lower. I was engaged. My fiancé was CFO at a startup that was supposed to go public. We had a house. We had a life. Then the startup imploded, the SEC got involved, and he went to prison for fraud. I had no idea what he'd been doing. I worked 80 hours a week at my own job, but it didn't matter. The house was in both our names. The debts were in both our names. When everything collapsed, half of it landed on me. Ethan's breath caught. What did you do? Kept working. Kept pretending everything was fine. Stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. Stopped taking care of myself in any meaningful way. I told myself I just needed to work harder, be better, prove I could handle it. Her jaw tightened. Instead, I ended up in the hospital with a stress-induced cardiac episode. 34 years old, and my heart nearly gave out because I was too stubborn to ask for help. But you obviously recovered. He gestured vaguely at her, at the expensive dress and the executive position and the life she'd clearly built. I recovered because someone helped me. My boss at the time, the CEO of the company I worked for, figured out what was happening. He created a position for me with better pay. He connected me with a financial counselor. He gave me space to heal. Vivian's expression softened slightly. He saved my life. And when he died 3 years ago, I promised myself I'd do the same for someone else, if I ever had the chance. The bathroom was silent except for the muffled sound of the party bleeding through the walls. Why are you telling me this? Ethan finally asked. Because you remind me of myself. Brilliant, hardworking, drowning, too proud to ask for help. She reached into her small clutch purse and pulled out a plain manila folder. And because I built something for people like us, she handed him the folder. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a document labeled Executive Mentorship Initiative, Confidential Proposal. Ethan read the first page, then the second, then went back and read them again because surely he was misunderstanding. But the words didn't change. Salary adjustment, $145,000. Current, $78,000. Immediate signing bonus, $10,000. Relocation assistance, $5,000. Financial counseling services, fully covered. Mental health support. Fully covered program duration, 24 months, with option to extend. He looked up at Vivian, unable to speak. It's not charity, she said firmly. It's an investment. You're good at what you do, or you were, before your life fell apart. I need people like you, Ethan. People who are smart and dedicated and capable of exceptional work when they're not running on empty. She paused. But I also need you healthy. So this program includes mandatory counseling, regular check-ins, and support to make sure you never end up in this situation again. I don't understand. Why me? Because I saw the pattern and I recognized it. Because you're not the first person to struggle like this and you won't be the last. Because our industry chews people up and spits them out, and I'm tired of watching talented employees destroy themselves. Her voice hardened slightly. And because I have the power to do something about it now, and I'm not going to waste that power. Ethan's hands were shaking so badly the folder rattled. What do you want in return? Your best work, your honesty about what you need, your help refining this program so it can help others. She met his eyes directly. And your silence about the personal details I just shared. This stays between us. That's what she'd said when they first walked in. This stays between us. He'd thought she meant his firing. Instead, she meant her past, her vulnerability, the fact that the terrifying CEO, known as the Executioner, had once been just as broken as he was. I don't know what to say. Say yes or say no, but decide tonight, because that rent payment bounces in 3 days, and I can have the signing bonus in your account by Monday morning if you accept. Ethan looked down at the folder again, at the numbers that would change everything, at the lifeline he'd stopped believing existed. There has to be a catch. The catch is that you have to actually use the resources, see the counselor, be honest in the check-ins, take care of yourself. Vivian's expression was serious. I'm not interested in Band-Aid solutions, Ethan. If you take this, you commit to getting better, really better. Can you do that? Could he? He'd been surviving on autopilot for so long he wasn't sure he remembered how to do anything else. But as he stood there in that locked bathroom, holding a folder that promised a way out of the nightmare his life had become, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Yes, he whispered, then louder. Yes, I can do that. Vivian nodded once, satisfied. Good. Come to my office Monday morning, 8 sharp. We'll make it official. She moved toward the door, then paused. And Ethan? Eat something before you leave tonight. You look like you're about to pass out. She unlocked the door and walked out, leaving him alone with the folder and the sound of his own heartbeat and the first real breath he'd taken in half a year. Ethan didn't remember walking back into the ballroom. He didn't remember loading up a plate with food from the buffet tables, though he must have, because suddenly he was sitting at an empty table near the back, mechanically eating chicken skewers and pasta salad that tasted like absolutely nothing. His hands had stopped shaking, but only because they'd gone numb. The folder sat on his lap, hidden under his jacket, feeling heavier than it should. Kelly found him 20 minutes later. There you are. I was worried you'd left. She slid into the chair beside him, her expression concerned. What happened? You look like you'd seen a ghost. I'm fine, Ethan said automatically, then realized how many times he'd said those exact words in the past 6 months, how many times he'd lied to himself and everyone else. Actually, no, I'm not fine, but I think I might be soon. She studied his face. That's cryptic. I know. I'm sorry. He set down his fork, suddenly aware that he'd eaten half the plate without tasting any of it. His stomach felt strange, stretched, and uncomfortable. Too much food too fast after months of not enough. I can't really explain right now, but things are going to change. Good change or bad change? He thought about Vivian's words in the bathroom, about the salary that would more than double his income, about the counseling and the support and the chance to actually fix what had broken. Good change, I think. Kelly reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. You deserve good change, Ethan. You've been through hell. He hadn't told her about Sarah, about the money, about any of it. But people noticed things even when you tried to hide them. The weight loss, the exhaustion, the way he'd withdrawn from every social interaction that wasn't strictly necessary. You couldn't hide a slow-motion collapse. Not really. Thank you. he said quietly. The DJ announced the last song of the night, some upbeat pop number that got a few people onto the makeshift dance floor. Ethan watched them spin and laugh, loosened by alcohol and holiday spirit, and felt like he was observing from another planet. He'd been so disconnected from normal life, from the simple pleasure of enjoying a moment without the constant background hum of panic. Maybe that would change now. Maybe he could learn to be a person again instead of just a survival mechanism wearing a human suit. He stayed until the party officially ended, then took the bus home through streets decorated with Christmas lights that blurred in the windows. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it. A studio with bare walls, minimal furniture, and the kind of silence that felt oppressive. He'd sold most of his belongings months ago, the TV, the gaming console, the decent coffee maker, anything that wasn't essential. What remained was functional and depressing. Ethan sat on his bed and opened the folder again, reading every word carefully. The program details, the salary structure, the support services. It all seemed too good to be true, which meant his brain immediately started searching for the trap. Why would Vivian do this? What did she really want? Was this some elaborate test, a way to see if he'd sell out his integrity for money? Would he show up Monday morning and find out it was all a cruel joke? But then he remembered her voice when she talked about her own past, the tightness in her jaw, the way her hands had clenched briefly when she mentioned the hospital. That hadn't been an act. You couldn't fake that kind of remembered pain. She'd lived this. She understood. And now she was offering him the same lifeline someone had once offered her. Ethan pulled out his laptop, 3 years old, held together with electrical tape and prayer, and opened his bank account, $12.37. He navigated to his rent payment history and confirmed what he already knew. The December payment had bounced. His landlord would get the notification Monday morning. But if Vivian was telling the truth, if this was real, then the signing bonus would hit his account Monday too. $10,000. Enough to cover December and January rent with money left over. Enough to buy actual groceries. Enough to stop the freefall. He wanted to believe it so badly it physically hurt. Sleep didn't come easily that night. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, running scenarios. Best case, everything Vivian promised was real, and his life was about to transform. Worst case, he'd been played somehow, and Monday would bring humiliation on top of everything else. Most likely case, something in between, because life was rarely as simple as complete salvation or total disaster. At some point near dawn, exhaustion finally dragged him under. Saturday and Sunday passed in a strange fog of anticipation and dread. Ethan cleaned his apartment, not that there was much to clean, and did laundry and tried to eat regular meals even though his stomach had apparently forgotten how to process normal amounts of food. He kept checking his phone, half expecting a message from Vivian saying she'd changed her mind. It was all a mistake. Please disregard everything from Friday night. The message never came. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, typical December weather in the city. Ethan put on his best suit, the one he'd bought for the interview 2 years ago, now hanging loose on his frame, and took the bus to work an hour early. The office building was nearly empty, just a few dedicated workaholics and the cleaning crew finishing their rounds. Vivian's office was on the executive floor behind a door marked with her name and title in elegant silver letters. Ethan stood outside for a full minute, trying to calm his racing heart before he finally knocked. "Come in." She was already at her desk, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than his monthly salary, his old monthly salary anyway. Her office was immaculate, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and absolutely zero personal touches. No photos, no plants, no evidence that an actual human being worked here. "You're early," Vivian said, glancing at her watch. "Good. Sit." Ethan sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. The folder from Friday night lay between them. "Did you think about it over the weekend?" she asked. "I didn't think about anything else." "And?" "I'm here." Vivian nodded, as if that settled something. She pulled out a stack of papers from her desk drawer and slid them across to him. "Employment contract. The salary and benefits we discussed are all outlined in Section 3. The mentorship program requirements are in Section 7. Read everything carefully before you sign." Ethan picked up the contract with hands that only trembled slightly. The letterhead was official Meridian Analytics stationery. The language was dense legal prose, but the numbers jumped out at him clear as day. $145,000 annual salary, $10,000 signing bonus, payable within 2 business days of contract execution. Health insurance that actually covered mental health services. 2 weeks paid time off, plus sick days, plus the option to work remotely when needed. It was real. All of it was real. Section 7, Vivian prompted. He flipped to the relevant page and started reading. The mentorship program required weekly one-on-one meetings with Vivian, bi-weekly sessions with a financial counselor, monthly check-ins with a mental health professional, and quarterly performance reviews. Participants were expected to maintain certain standards, not perfection, but consistent effort toward improvement. The counseling is mandatory, Vivian said, non-negotiable. If you skip sessions without valid cause, you're out of the program. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really understand, Ethan. This isn't just about throwing money at the problem. Money helps. It helps a lot. But it's not enough by itself. You need to address why you ended up here. The breakup, the financial stress, the isolation, all of it. He looked up from the contract. You think I need therapy? I think you need support. Therapy is part of that. Her expression softened fractionally. I fought it at first too. Thought I could handle everything on my own, that asking for help was weakness. Then my therapist pointed out that refusing help when you're drowning isn't strength, it's just a slower way to die. The bluntness of it hit him like cold water. That's dark. It's true. She leaned back in her chair. You're smart enough to know you can't keep going the way you were. That's why you're here. So don't waste this opportunity by half-assing the recovery part. Ethan read through the rest of the contract, every clause and subsection, even though he'd already made his decision before he walked through the door. Finally, he picked up the pen Vivian had placed beside the papers. Where do I sign? She showed him. 4 places, initials and signature, date and print name. When he finished, she signed as well, her handwriting confident and precise. Done, she said. The signing bonus will be in your account by end of business Wednesday. Your new salary starts with the next pay cycle, which is Friday. Any questions? Just one. Ethan hesitated. Why are you doing this? Really? Vivian was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Because I can. Because someone did it for me. Because the system is designed to chew up people like us, and I'm tired of watching it happen. She met his eyes directly. And because I see potential in you that's being wasted on survival mode. I want to know what you can do when you're actually functioning at full capacity. It was the most honest answer he could have hoped for. Not altruism, not pity, but enlightened self-interest mixed with genuine understanding. Vivian wanted good employees, and she was willing to invest in creating them. Thank you, Ethan said. I won't let you down. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've been through a few sessions with Dr. Morrison. She's the therapist. She's excellent, and she does not accept bullshit. Vivian pulled out her phone and tapped something. I'm sending you her contact information now, along with the financial counselor's details. Schedule your first appointments by end of week. Ethan's phone buzzed. 2 new contacts, Dr. Sarah Morrison, licensed clinical psychologist, and David Chen, certified financial planner. Our weekly meetings will be Tuesdays at 7 a.m., Vivian continued. I know it's early, but it's the only consistent slot I have. We'll meet in the small conference room on this floor, more private than my office. 7 a.m. is fine. I'm usually here by 6:30 anyway. I know, I've noticed. She stood, indicating the meeting was over. One more thing, Ethan. This program is confidential. HR knows the basic structure, but the personal details, yours, mine, anyone else who might join, those stay private. Understood? Yes. Good. Now get back to work. You have a data model to finish for the Henderson account. He did, though he'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of the past few days. Ethan gathered the signed contract and stood to leave. Ethan? He turned back. Vivian's expression was unreadable. Welcome to the program. Don't make me regret this. It could have sounded like a threat, but somehow it didn't. It sounded like a challenge, like she was betting on him and expected him to win. I won't, he promised. The next 2 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Ethan tried to focus on work, but his brain kept drifting to his bank account, to the number that would appear there Wednesday evening. $10,000. More money than he'd seen in one place since Sarah left. He called his landlord Tuesday afternoon, his heart pounding. "Mr. Cole," the property manager said flatly, "I was about to call you. Your December rent bounced." "I know. I'm sorry. There was a banking error, but it's been resolved. The payment will clear by end of week, along with any fees I owe." A pause. "Banking error?" "Yes, my employer is handling it." Not quite a lie. Close enough. Another pause, longer this time. "Fine, but if the payment doesn't clear by Friday, we're starting eviction proceedings. No more extensions." "Understood. Thank you." Ethan hung up and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Friday. He could make it to Friday. Wednesday evening at 6:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with a notification from his banking app. He opened it with shaking hands. Deposit, $10,000 or dollars. New balance, 10,012.37. Ethan stared at the number until his vision blurred. It was real. All of it was real. He wasn't going to be evicted. He could buy groceries. He could breathe. He sat down on his bed and cried for the first time since Sarah left. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. Relief, gratitude, grief for the months he'd spent drowning, fear that this was somehow temporary and would be taken away. All of it poured out in the privacy of his empty apartment while traffic noise filtered through the thin walls. When he finally stopped, his face was wet and his chest ached, but something inside him felt lighter, looser, like a knot that had been pulled tight for so long it had forgotten how to be anything else. Thursday morning, Ethan stopped at a real grocery store on the way to work. Not the dollar store where he'd been buying ramen, but an actual grocery store with a produce section and a butcher counter and bread that hadn't been sitting on a shelf for 3 weeks. He bought chicken breast and fresh vegetables and eggs and coffee that came in a bag instead of a plastic tub. He bought yogurt and apples and a loaf of sourdough bread that cost $8 and was worth every penny. At the register, the total came to $73, and he didn't even flinch. That night, he cooked a real meal for the first time in half a year. Nothing fancy, just pan-seared chicken with roasted broccoli and rice, but it tasted like hope, like the possibility of normal life, like maybe he could be okay again. Friday brought his first paycheck under the new salary structure. The difference was staggering. After taxes and deductions, his take-home had more than doubled. Ethan paid his rent for December and January, paid the late fees, paid every outstanding bill that had been haunting him. His bank balance still had $4,000 in it. $4,000. Emergency fund territory, breathing room territory. Not having a panic attack every time his phone buzzed territory. Saturday. He called Dr. Morrison and scheduled his first therapy appointment for the following week. The conversation was brief and professional. She asked a few basic questions. Was he in crisis? Did he have any immediate safety concerns? What were his goals for therapy? And then confirmed the appointment time. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Ethan," she said before they hung up. "Ms. Hartwell speaks highly of your potential," which meant Vivian had already talked to her. Of course she had. Vivian struck him as the type who planned 17 steps ahead and left nothing to chance. Sunday, he met with David Chen, the financial counselor, at a coffee shop downtown. David was in his 40s, wore a sweater vest, unironically, and had the kind of calm, unflappable demeanor that probably made him excellent at his job. "So," David said, opening his laptop, "let's talk about where you are financially and where you want to be." Ethan laid it all out. The student loans, the credit card debt from covering expenses after Sarah left, the complete absence of savings, the rent that ate most of his income, the fear that had been his constant companion for months. David listened without judgment, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. When Ethan finished, David pulled up a spreadsheet. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking. First priority is building an emergency fund. 3 months of expenses minimum. Based on your new salary, we can do that in about 4 months if we're aggressive. Second priority is paying down the credit card debt. Third is increasing your student loan payments to reduce the long-term interest. And fourth is starting retirement contributions because you're young enough that compound interest is your best friend. He walked Ethan through the budget he'd created, showing where the money would go each month. It was detailed and practical and made everything feel manageable instead of overwhelming. This assumes you don't have any major unexpected expenses, David added. But that's what the emergency fund is for. Once you have that buffer, the anxiety decreases significantly. How do you know about the anxiety? David smiled slightly. Because everyone I work with through this program has it. Financial stress isn't just about the numbers, Ethan. It's about the constant fear, the shame, the feeling that you're failing at basic adulting. We're going to address all of that, not just the spreadsheets. They spent another hour going over details, setting up automatic transfers, creating accountability check-ins. By the time Ethan left the coffee shop, he had a plan. An actual, concrete plan for getting his financial life under control. Monday night, he had his first session with Dr. Morrison. Her office was in a converted brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, all warm lighting and comfortable furniture that didn't feel clinical. Dr. Morrison herself was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 30s, with kind eyes and a direct manner that reminded him slightly of Vivian. "Tell me what brings you here," she said after the initial pleasantries. Ethan had prepared for this question, but sitting in the therapist's office with the weight of actual attention on him made all his rehearsed answers evaporate. "I don't really know where to start." "Start anywhere. We'll find our way." So he started with Sarah, with the engagement and the betrayal and the financial implosion, with the months of barely surviving, the weight loss, the exhaustion, with the certainty that he was failing at everything and the terror of asking for help. Dr. Morrison listened, occasionally taking notes, but mostly just being present in a way that felt surprisingly safe. "It sounds like you've been in survival mode for a long time," she said when he paused. "That makes sense given what you've been through. But survival mode isn't sustainable long term. It burns you out." "I know, I just didn't know how to stop." Because stopping felt dangerous. If you let your guard down, if you admitted how bad things were, then you'd have to face it all. And facing it felt more terrifying than just pushing through. Ethan nodded, throat tight. "The thing about survival mode, Dr. Morrison continued, is that it's very good at keeping you alive, but it's terrible at letting you actually live. Does that resonate?" "Yes," he whispered. They talked for the full 50-minute session, and when Ethan left, he felt wrung out and oddly hopeful. This was going to be hard work, harder than just getting a bigger paycheck, but maybe it was the work he needed to do. Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., Ethan showed up for his first official mentorship meeting with Vivian. The small conference room was private and quiet, with a window overlooking the city just beginning to wake up. Vivian was already there, 2 cups of coffee on the table. "You look better," she said by way of greeting, "less like you're about to collapse." "I feel better. The paycheck helped." "Money usually does, but it's not everything." She slid one of the coffee cups toward him. "How did the first appointments go? Morrison and Chen?" "Good. Intense, but good. Dr. Morrison is..." He searched for the right word. "Perceptive. That's why I recommended her. She sees through bullshit, and she doesn't let you hide from yourself." Vivian took a sip of her own coffee. "David's the same way with finances. They're both excellent at what they do." They spent the next 45 minutes talking about his work, his goals, the areas where he needed to improve. Vivian was demanding but fair, pointing out weak spots in his recent projects while acknowledging the progress he'd already made. "Your analysis of the Henderson data was solid," she said. "Much better than the work you were producing a month ago. But you're still second-guessing yourself too much. Trust your instincts." "What if my instincts are wrong?" "Then you'll be wrong and you'll learn from it. That's how growth works." She leaned back in her chair. "You're used to thinking that mistakes are catastrophic. They're not. They're just information." It was such a different philosophy from the one he'd been operating under, the belief that any mistake could be the one that destroyed everything. But Vivian was right. When you weren't constantly on the edge of disaster, mistakes became learning opportunities instead of existential threats. "I'll work on that," Ethan said. "See that you do." Vivian glanced at her watch. "One more thing before we wrap up. I'm going to be rolling this program out to 2 more employees in the next month. Different circumstances than yours, but similar levels of potential being wasted on crisis management." Ethan's eyebrows rose. Who? That's confidential, but I wanted you to know that this isn't just about you. It's about building something sustainable, a model that works. You're the pilot case, Ethan. How well you do will determine how much support I can get for expanding this program. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing, but instead it felt galvanizing. He wasn't just saving himself, he was potentially opening the door for others. No pressure, he said dryly. Vivian smiled, quick and rare. Oh, there's plenty of pressure, but I think you can handle it. She stood, indicating the meeting was over. Same time next week. And Ethan, keep eating real food. You still look half-starved. Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan settled into a new rhythm. Work, therapy, financial planning, weekly check-ins with Vivian. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt like structure, like someone had given him a framework to rebuild on. His work improved dramatically. With actual sleep and actual food fueling his brain, he could think clearly again. Problems that had seemed insurmountable became solvable. The Henderson account analysis turned into a full proposal that impressed the client enough to expand their contract. His supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who'd been watching his decline with worried eyes, called him into her office to say she'd noticed the turnaround. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, Patricia said. This is the Ethan I hired. Welcome back. He didn't tell her about the program. Vivian had been clear about confidentiality, but he accepted the praise and let himself feel proud of the work he was producing. Dr. Morrison was everything Vivian had promised, perceptive, direct, unwilling to let him hide. They dug into his patterns, his beliefs about himself, the ways the breakup with Sarah had reinforced old wounds about not being enough. You've been treating yourself like a problem to be solved, she said during their third session. Like if you could just work hard enough, be good enough, then you deserve to exist. But that's not how it works, Ethan. You deserve to exist and be treated well simply because you're human. The work you do is separate from your inherent worth. It was a nice idea, but believing it was harder. Still, he was trying. David Chen helped him set up automatic savings, pay down his highest interest debt, and start thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan had a budget that worked and money in the bank. You're doing really well, David told him during their fourth meeting. Most people take twice as long to build this kind of financial stability. I'm motivated, Ethan said. That helps. But you're also following through, which is the harder part. David closed his laptop. Keep this up and you'll have that emergency fund fully funded by March. Then we can start tackling the bigger goals. Life wasn't perfect. Ethan still had bad days, still caught himself spiraling sometimes, still felt the phantom weight of those months of crisis. But he was learning to recognize the patterns, to ask for help before things got critical, to trust that he had support instead of being alone. And through it all, there was Vivian. Their Tuesday morning meetings became the anchor of his week. She pushed him professionally, demanded excellence, refused to accept excuses, but she also listened, remembered details, adjusted expectations when he was genuinely struggling. She was exacting, and she was fair, and Ethan found himself wanting to impress her in a way that went beyond just keeping his job. He told himself it was professional admiration, respect for someone who'd built something extraordinary and was sharing that knowledge with him. Nothing more. But then came the morning in late January when Vivian walked into their meeting looking tired, really tired, the kind that makeup couldn't quite hide, and Ethan felt his chest tighten with concern that had nothing to do with professional respect. Long night? He asked carefully. Board meeting until midnight, vultures circling over the Q4 numbers. She sat down heavily, rubbing her temples. They want to know why I'm spending money on employee development programs instead of maximizing short-term profits. Ethan's stomach dropped. The mentorship program? Among other things. Vivian looked up at him. Don't worry, I can handle the board, but I need results to show them. Real, quantifiable results. What kind of results? The kind where your work speaks for itself. The kind where other people notice the difference. She leaned forward. I need you to be undeniable, Ethan. Can you do that? He thought about the past month, about how far he'd come from the person who'd nearly collapsed at the holiday party, about the potential Vivian had seen in him when he couldn't see it himself. Yes, he said, I can do that. And he meant it. The opportunity to prove himself came faster than Ethan expected. 2 days after that conversation with Vivian, Patricia called an emergency team meeting about the Kaufman Industries account, a potential client worth $8 million in annual revenue. They'd been courting Kaufman for 6 months, but the CEO was notoriously difficult to impress and had rejected 3 previous proposals. They want something innovative, Patricia said, her stress evident in the tension around her eyes. Something that demonstrates we understand their business better than they understand it themselves. We have 2 weeks to deliver a presentation that will blow their minds, or we lose them to Anderson Consulting. The room fell silent. Anderson Consulting was the biggest name in the industry, with resources Meridian couldn't match. Competing with them head-to-head was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. "I'll take lead on it," Ethan heard himself say. Everyone turned to look at him. Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Ethan, this is high stakes. Are you sure you're ready for that level of pressure?" 3 months ago, he would have said no, would have deflected, played it safe, hidden behind someone more senior. But 3 months ago, he'd been a different person. "I'm sure," he said steadily. "I've been studying Kaufman's operations. I have ideas." Patricia studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing the risk. "All right, you've got lead. James and Kelly, you'll support him. 2 weeks, people. Make it count." Ethan spent that night at the office until 11, pulling everything he could find on Kaufman Industries. Financial reports, trade publications, competitor analyses, industry trends. The company manufactured industrial components, not sexy, not exciting, but essential to dozens of supply chains. Their biggest problem was inefficiency in their distribution network, which was costing them approximately $12 million annually in excess logistics costs. Most consulting firms would address that directly, proposing streamlined routing and warehouse optimization. Standard solutions. Expected solutions. Ethan had a different idea. He called Vivian at 6 the next morning before their scheduled meeting. She answered on the second ring, sounding wide awake despite the early hour. "This better be important, Ethan. I need access to our proprietary predictive modeling software, the full version, not the standard package." A pause. "That's restricted to senior analysts and above. Why do you need it?" "The Kaufman account. I want to build them a model that predicts supply chain disruptions before they happen, not just optimizes the current system. If I can show them how to avoid the disruptions entirely, the distribution inefficiency becomes irrelevant." Another pause, longer this time. "That's ambitious. Can you actually build that in 2 weeks?" "I think so, but I need the software access in about 80 hours of uninterrupted work time. If you pull this off, it's exactly the kind of undeniable result I was talking about." Her voice sharpened with something that might have been approval. "Access granted. I'll have it set up your credentials by 9. Don't make me regret this." "I won't." He didn't. For the next 13 days, Ethan lived and breathed the Kaufman project. He arrived at the office at 5 in the morning and left around midnight. He ate lunch at his desk and dinner at his desk, and probably would have slept at his desk if Kelly hadn't physically dragged him home a few times. But it wasn't like before. He wasn't running on fumes and desperation. He was eating real meals. Kelly made sure of that, bringing him sandwiches and fruit when she noticed him forgetting. He was sleeping, even if not enough. He was functioning, sharp and focused, instead of just grinding himself down. The model came together piece by piece. Historical data on Kaufman's suppliers, weather patterns that affected shipping routes, geopolitical factors that created bottlenecks, maintenance cycles for transportation equipment. Ethan fed it all into the predictive software and watched the algorithms find patterns that human analysis would have missed. James helped with the data visualization, creating interactive dashboards that would let Kaufman's executives explore different scenarios in real time. Kelly handled the financial projections, showing exactly how much money the predictive model would save over 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. The numbers were staggering. If the model worked as designed, Kaufman could cut their logistics costs by 40% while simultaneously improving delivery times. It was the kind of transformation that could revolutionize their entire operation. "This is brilliant," Patricia said when Ethan presented the preliminary version to her. "Genuinely brilliant. How confident are you in the accuracy?" 92% based on backtesting against the last 3 years of Kaufman's actual performance. The model correctly predicted 87% of their major disruptions. And the other 13%? Black swan events. Completely unpredictable factors. No model can account for everything, but this gets us closer than anything else available. Patricia nodded slowly, and Ethan could see her mentally calculating the odds. Okay, you present this to Kaufman's executive team on Friday. Full formal presentation, 30 minutes plus Q&A. Think you can handle that? His heart rate kicked up, but not with panic, with anticipation. Yes. Good. Because Vivian Hartwell will be in the room. She wants to see this herself. Of course she did. The board was watching her programs, questioning her spending. She needed wins just as much as he did. Ethan spent the final 2 days refining the presentation until every slide was perfect, every transition smooth, every talking point memorized. He practiced in front of Kelly and James until they could recite it along with him. He ran through potential questions and prepared answers for each one. The night before the presentation, Dr. Morrison asked him how he was feeling. Nervous, he admitted, but good nervous, excited nervous. Not the kind of nervous where I think I'm going to fail. That's growth, she said, smiling. 3 months ago, could you have imagined feeling this way? He thought about the man who'd stood in that bathroom at the holiday party, certain his life was over. No, definitely not. You've done remarkable work, Ethan, not just on this project, but on yourself. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that. The presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Kaufman's headquarters downtown. Ethan arrived an hour early with James and Kelly, setting up the equipment and doing final sound checks. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. Vivian showed up 30 minutes before start time, impeccable in a gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She pulled Ethan aside while James and Kelly finished the setup. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly. "Ready?" She studied his face, those sharp gray eyes missing nothing. "You've come a long way since December. I had help. You did the work. I just provided resources." She glanced toward the conference room where Kaufman's executives were gathering. "These people are tough. They don't suffer fools and they don't accept mediocrity. Show them what you're capable of." "I will." Vivian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I know you will. That's why I'm here." The Kaufman executives filed in at exactly 2 o'clock, 6 of them, all senior leadership, all looking skeptical. Their CEO, Richard Kaufman, was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with the kind of aggressive handshake that felt like a challenge. He took the seat at the head of the table and fixed Ethan with a stare that would have been intimidating 3 months ago. Now, Ethan met it calmly. "Mr. Kaufman, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I think you're going to be impressed with what we've developed." "That's what the last 3 firms said," Kaufman replied gruffly. "Impress me." Ethan dimmed the lights and began. He walked them through Kaufman Industries' current distribution challenges, using their own data to illustrate the scale of the problem. 12 million in annual losses, delayed shipments affecting customer satisfaction, inefficiencies that were costing them competitive advantage. The executives nodded. This was familiar territory, nothing they didn't already know. Then Ethan shifted gears. Most consulting firms would tell you to optimize your current system. Better routing, consolidated warehouses, improved scheduling. Those solutions would save you maybe 2-3 million annually. We're proposing something different. He pulled up the predictive model, the interface elegant and intuitive. Instead of reacting to disruptions, what if you could see them coming? What if you knew 3 weeks in advance that a supplier in Taiwan was going to have production delays because of monsoon season? What if you could reroute shipments around a highway closure that hasn't been announced yet? What if you could predict equipment failures before they strand your freight? He demonstrated, running scenarios in real time. The model flagged a potential bottleneck in Kaufman's Seattle distribution hub, projected it would cause a 7-day delay, and suggested 3 alternative solutions complete with cost-benefit analyses. "This is based on your actual data from last March," Ethan explained. The model predicted this disruption with 94% accuracy. If you'd had this system then, you could have avoided $300,000 in expedited shipping costs. Kaufman leaned forward, his skepticism shifting to interest. How does it work? Ethan explained the methodology, the data inputs, the machine learning algorithms, the continuous improvement cycle that made the model more accurate over time. He showed them the financial projections, 40% reduction in logistics costs within the first year, improving to 55% by year 3. One of the executives, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, asked the question Ethan had been waiting for. This sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? The catch is that it requires significant upfront investment in data infrastructure and ongoing maintenance. You'll need to integrate your systems, provide continuous data feeds, and assign staff to monitor the outputs. It's not a magic bullet. It's a tool that requires commitment. How much upfront investment? Kaufman asked. Kelly stepped forward with the cost breakdown. It was substantial, $2 million in the first year, but the ROI was undeniable. They'd break even in 7 months and save tens of millions over the contract lifetime. The room fell silent as Kaufman's team processed the information. Ethan could feel his heart pounding, but kept his expression neutral and professional. Vivian sat in the corner, her face unreadable, watching everything. Finally, Kaufman spoke. I've sat through a lot of presentations, son. Seen a lot of consultants promise the moon. This is the first time I've actually believed someone might be able to deliver it. Ethan's chest loosened slightly. We can deliver it, sir, and we can prove it. Give us a 3-month pilot program. If the model doesn't perform as promised, you walk away with no further obligation. Smart, Kaufman said, nodding. Put your money where your mouth is. He looked at his team. Thoughts? Margaret spoke first. The technology is sound. I'm impressed with the backtesting results. If they can replicate that accuracy going forward, this could transform our entire operation. The other executives chimed in with questions, concerns, and ultimately cautious optimism. By the time the meeting ended an hour later, Kaufman was shaking Ethan's hand again, this time with something that felt like respect instead of challenge. You'll hear from our legal team by Monday, Kaufman said. Assuming the contract terms are reasonable, I think we can make this work. It wasn't a done deal, not yet, but it was as close as anyone got without signatures on paper. After the Kaufman executives left, Patricia grabbed Ethan in a hug that nearly knocked him over. You absolute rock star! Do you know what you just did? That's an $8 million account, Ethan. $8 million! James and Kelly were grinning, high-fiving, riding the adrenaline rush of a successful pitch. Even Vivian was smiling, small and controlled, but genuine. Well done, she said quietly when she could pull him aside. That was exactly what I needed. What you needed. What we both needed, she corrected. The board wants proof that investing in people pays off. You just gave them that proof. She paused, something shifting in her expression. And you proved something to yourself too, I think. She was right. 3 months ago, he would have crumbled under this kind of pressure, would have convinced himself he wasn't good enough, smart enough, ready enough. But standing here now, having just landed the biggest account of his career, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not arrogance, not overconfidence, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd done excellent work and earned the recognition that came with it. Thank you, he said, for everything. The program, the opportunity, the faith you had when I didn't have any myself. Vivian's expression softened in that rare way that made her seem less like the executioner and more like the person who'd once been as broken as he was. You're welcome. But don't thank me too much. You're going to be working incredibly hard for the next 6 months implementing this system. I can handle it. I know you can. That's why I'm also assigning you 2 junior analysts to manage. Time to start building your own leadership skills. His eyes widened. You're promoting me? Not officially, not yet. But you will be once the Kaufman contract is signed and implemented successfully. Consider this the trial run. She checked her watch. I need to get back for another meeting. Enjoy the win, Ethan. You earned it. She left before he could respond, her heels clicking away down the corridor with that same confident precision that had terrified him 6 months ago. Now it just sounded like strength. The celebration at a nearby bar that night was rowdy and genuine. Patricia bought rounds for the whole team, toasting Ethan's success and predicting great things for his future. People from other departments stopped by to congratulate him. The word had spread fast that the struggling analyst had just landed the white whale account. Ethan nursed a single beer and let the warmth of accomplishment sink in. Kelly sat beside him, her face flushed with happiness and alcohol. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "Watching you come back. It was like watching someone return from the dead." He looked at her, this woman who'd been kind when he was barely functional, who'd brought him food and checked on him and never once made him feel like a burden. "I couldn't have done it without people like you." "Yeah, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." She clinked her glass against his. "To not doing it alone." "To not doing it alone," he echoed. When he finally got home that night, early by celebration standards, but he still had a therapy appointment in the morning, Ethan lay in bed and took stock of his life. 4 months ago, he'd been drowning. No money, no hope, no future beyond survival. Now he had savings in the bank, had a career that was not only stable but thriving, had support systems and people who cared, and the beginning of belief that he might actually be okay. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it, frowning. "Congratulations on the Kaufman account. I knew you had it in you. VH." Ethan stared at the message. Vivian had never texted him before. Their communication was always formal, scheduled, professional. This felt different, personal. He typed back, "Thank you. Couldn't have done it without your support." The reply came quickly. "Don't sell yourself short. The work was all you. Sleep well, Ethan. You've earned it." He did sleep well, better than he had in months. And when he woke up the next morning to his alarm at 5:30, he actually felt rested instead of just less exhausted. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of contract negotiations and implementation planning. Kaufman's legal team had questions. Their technical team had concerns. Their finance team wanted guarantees. Ethan handled it all with a confidence that surprised even him, backed up by James and Kelly, and occasionally Vivian when executive presence was needed. During their Tuesday morning meeting, Vivian informed him that 2 more employees had joined the mentorship program. "I can't tell you who," she said, "but I wanted you to know. Your success made it possible to expand. The board approved funding for 5 more positions based on the ROI you've demonstrated." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. 5 more people get help because I didn't fail? 5 more people get help because you succeeded spectacularly. There's a difference. She pulled out a folder, similar to the one she'd given him in December, but thicker. "I also want to start involving you in the program itself, helping identify candidates, providing peer mentorship, sharing your experience. Think you're interested?" "Absolutely. When do we start?" "Next month. First, we need to get Kaufman fully implemented and you fully promoted. One transformation at a time." But the transformation was already happening in ways Ethan was only beginning to recognize. His sessions with Dr. Morrison were peeling back layers of belief systems he'd been operating under for years. The idea that his worth was tied to productivity, that asking for help was weakness, that he had to be perfect to deserve basic respect. "You're allowed to be human," Dr. Morrison told him during one session. "You're allowed to make mistakes, have needs, take up space. Those aren't things you earn through achievement. They're inherent rights." "That's a nice theory," Ethan said. "Believing it is harder." "Of course it is. You've spent your whole life being told the opposite." She leaned forward slightly. "But you're building evidence now. Evidence that you can be supported and still be competent. That you can accept help and still be strong. Let that evidence speak." He tried. Some days were easier than others. Some days he still caught himself spiraling into old patterns. The belief that he was one mistake away from losing everything, that relaxing meant danger, that he couldn't trust good things to last. But he had tools now, people to call, strategies to manage the anxiety. And increasingly, he had proof that the catastrophe his brain predicted wasn't actually coming. March brought the official promotion, senior analyst, with a title and a salary bump and an office instead of a cubicle. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, but it was his. Ethan put his nameplate on the door and felt absurdly proud. Patricia called him into her office the day after the announcement. "I need to tell you something," she said, her expression serious. "I almost fired you in December." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What?" "You were struggling so badly, and I didn't know why. I thought maybe you were checked out, looking for other jobs, deliberately underperforming. I had the paperwork ready." She paused. "Then Vivian Hartwell called me into her office and told me that you were being transferred into a special development program and that I was not, under any circumstances, to take action against you without consulting her first." "She did that?" "She did that. And she didn't explain why, just said it was handled at the executive level." Patricia smiled slightly. "I was annoyed at the time, felt like she was overstepping, but watching what you've accomplished in the last 4 months, I get it now. She saw something in you that I was too close to see." Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd known Vivian had protected him, but hearing the specifics, knowing how close he'd come to losing everything right before she stepped in, was overwhelming. "Thank you for telling me," he managed. "Thank you for proving her right. You've become one of my best analysts, Ethan. Keep doing what you're doing." That night, Ethan wanted to thank Vivian properly, not just with an email or a quick comment in their Tuesday meeting. He found himself lingering after hours, knowing she usually worked late, and finally knocked on her office door around 7. "Come in." She was at her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by reports and financial projections. She looked up when he entered and removed the glasses. "Ethan, something wrong?" "No, I just—" He closed the door behind him. "Patricia told me you stopped her from firing me in December, before the program, before everything." Vivian set down the document she'd been reading. "She shouldn't have told you that." "Maybe not, but I'm glad she did." He moved closer to her desk. "I never really understood how close I came to losing everything, or how much you risked by intervening. It wasn't a risk, it was a calculated decision based on available data." "It was faith," Ethan corrected gently. "You had faith I could recover when everyone else, including me, thought I was done." She was quiet for a moment, and in the evening light filtering through her office windows, she looked tired. Not exhausted like he'd been, but carrying the weight of too many decisions, too many responsibilities. "I saw myself in you," she said finally. "That's not entirely professional to admit, but it's true. I saw someone drowning and I remembered what that felt like, and I couldn't just watch it happen. Not when I had the power to help. It was more than help. You saved my life. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not." Ethan held her gaze. "I was 3 days from eviction and maybe a week from a complete breakdown. Without this program, I don't know where I'd be right now. Probably not here. Probably not anywhere good." Vivian's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her features before she locked it down. "Well, you are here, and you're thriving. That's what matters." "Because of you." "Because of you," she countered. "I provided resources. You did the actual work of rebuilding." They looked at each other across the desk, and Ethan felt something electric in the air between them. Something that had been building slowly over months of Tuesday morning meetings and professional conversations and moments of unexpected connection. He should leave, should thank her and go home and maintain the appropriate boundaries between mentor and mentee, between CEO and employee. But he didn't want to. "Vivian," he started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. She stood up, moving around the desk to stand closer to him. "Whatever you're about to say, think very carefully. We have a professional relationship. I'm your boss, the power dynamic. I know. I understand all of that." His heart was pounding. "But I also think you feel this too, whatever this is." Her jaw tightened. "Ethan, am I wrong?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Finally, Vivian spoke, her voice low. "No, you're not wrong." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Ethan's breath caught. "But that doesn't mean we act on it," Vivian continued firmly. "This program, your career, everything we've built, it's all predicated on appropriate professional boundaries. If we cross that line, we risk everything." "I know." And he did know. Understood the complications, the potential for disaster, all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But standing here in her office with the city lights starting to twinkle outside, and Vivian looking at him with an expression that matched the want he felt in his own chest, those reasons felt distant and academic. "I should go," he said, not moving. "Yes, you should." Neither of them moved. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, something in her expression had shifted. There's a leadership conference in Colorado next month. 2 days of workshops and networking. I'm required to attend, and I'm allowed to bring 2 senior staff members. I was planning to bring Patricia and Robert from sales. Okay, Ethan said slowly, not understanding where this was going. But Robert can't make it, scheduling conflict. So there's an open spot. She met his eyes. Would you be interested? His pulse kicked up. In attending a conference with you? In attending a professional development opportunity that happens to be in a different state, away from the office, where the normal daily pressures and constraints don't apply. Her voice was carefully neutral. Purely professional, of course. Of course. Except they both knew it wasn't. Couldn't be. Not with this tension crackling between them. Ethan knew he should say no. Should maintain the boundaries, protect what they'd built, be smart about the consequences. Yes, he heard himself say. I'm interested. Vivian nodded once, her expression giving nothing away. Good. I'll have my assistant send you the details. Now go home, Ethan. Get some rest. He left, his mind spinning, his heart racing with equal parts anticipation and apprehension. Whatever was happening between them, whatever this was becoming, they'd crossed some invisible threshold tonight. There was no going back to purely professional now, even if they tried. The question was, what came next? The month leading up to the Colorado conference felt like walking a tightrope. Ethan threw himself into work with an intensity that impressed even Patricia, managing the Kaufman implementation while simultaneously mentoring the 2 junior analysts Vivian had assigned him. The work was demanding, but no longer crushing. He had the energy for it now, the mental clarity that came from actually taking care of himself. But underneath the professional productivity ran a current of anticipation that made his chest tight every time he thought about Colorado. About 2 days away from the office with Vivian, away from the structured safety of their Tuesday morning meetings, and the carefully maintained distance they'd been preserving since that night in her office, Dr. Morrison noticed the shift during their weekly session. You seem distracted, she observed. Not in a bad way necessarily, but somewhere else mentally. What's going on? Ethan hesitated. The therapist-client privilege meant anything he said stayed confidential, but admitting it out loud felt dangerous, like it would make the situation more real, more complicated. There's a professional conference next month, he said carefully. Leadership development. Vivian invited me to attend. Dr. Morrison's expression remained neutral. And that's causing you anxiety? Not anxiety exactly, more like, he searched for the right word. Anticipation, maybe some concern about boundaries. Boundaries between you and Ms. Hartwell? There was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. Ethan took a breath and decided to be honest. I think I have feelings for her. Inappropriate feelings, given that she's my boss and my mentor, and the person who basically saved my life. Why do you consider those feelings inappropriate? Because of the power dynamic. Because she's in a position of authority over me. Because if anything happened between us, it could compromise everything we've built. The program, my career, her reputation. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. Those are all valid concerns, but let me ask you something. Have these feelings interfered with your professional relationship so far? No, we've maintained appropriate boundaries. And has Ms. Hartwell done or said anything to make you feel pressured or uncomfortable? No, if anything, she's been the one maintaining distance. Ethan leaned back in his chair. But I know, the feelings aren't one-sided. She admitted as much. We just haven't acted on them. So you're both adults who are aware of the complications and are choosing to handle things professionally while acknowledging that attraction exists. Put that way, it sounded less scandalous. Yeah, I guess so. The question isn't whether the feelings are appropriate or inappropriate, Dr. Morrison said. Feelings just are. The question is what you do with them. As long as you're both being honest, maintaining consent, and protecting the professional relationship, you're not doing anything wrong. She paused. But you do need to think about what you want and what the potential consequences are of pursuing anything beyond professional. Ethan left that session with more questions than answers. What did he want? In the abstract, he wanted Vivian, wanted to explore whatever this connection was between them. But in the concrete reality of his life, wanting her meant risking everything she'd helped him build. Was that fair to either of them? The Kaufman implementation was consuming most of his working hours, but it was going well. The predictive model was performing even better than projected, catching potential disruptions with 96% accuracy. Richard Kaufman himself called to express his satisfaction. "Your team is excellent, son," Kaufman said over speakerphone during one of their progress check-ins. "We're seeing results already, real, measurable improvements to our bottom line." Patricia was beside herself with joy. "Do you know what this means? Kaufman is already recommending us to other companies in their network. We're going to have more business than we can handle." Which meant Meridian needed to expand, which meant Vivian was under less pressure from the board about her spending on employee development programs. The mentorship initiative was proving its value in dollars and cents, the language executives understood best. During their Tuesday meeting 2 weeks before Colorado, Vivian told him the program was being formalized. "The board approved it as a permanent line item in the budget," she said, and there was satisfaction in her voice. 5 positions initially, with potential to expand based on results. "You helped make that happen, Ethan." "We helped make that happen," he corrected. "You built the framework. I just proved it could work." "Take the credit. You've earned it." She pulled out her tablet, swiping through what looked like presentation slides. "I'm also going to need your help with something. Part of the Colorado conference involves presenting the mentorship program to other CEOs as a potential model. I want you there for that presentation." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "You want me to talk about my own experience?" "Only if you're comfortable. But yes, the data is compelling, but personal testimony is powerful. Executives respond to stories, not just statistics." The idea of standing in front of a room full of CEOs and admitting how close he'd come to complete collapse was terrifying. But it was also an opportunity to help others, to maybe inspire other companies to invest in their struggling employees instead of just firing them. "I'll do it," he said. "On one condition." Vivian's expression sharpened with interest. "Which is?" "I want to be involved in selecting the next candidates for the program. I know what the warning signs look like now. I can help identify people who need support before they hit crisis point." She considered this for a moment. "That could work. You'd be reporting directly to me on those assessments. This can't go through normal HR channels because of privacy concerns." "Understood. All right. We'll start after Colorado." She glanced at her watch. "Speaking of which, I'm finalizing the travel arrangements today. We leave Thursday afternoon, conference runs Friday and Saturday, return Sunday morning. 3 days. 72 hours in close proximity. Professional but not." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Sounds good," he managed to say evenly. Vivian's eyes met his, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped. He saw the same anticipation he felt reflected in her expression, the same awareness of what might happen when they were away from the careful constraints of the office. Then she blinked, and it was gone, replaced by cool professionalism. "I'll have my assistant send you the itinerary. We're staying at the conference hotel, separate rooms, obviously, and there will be several networking events in the evenings." "Obviously," Ethan echoed, though the specification of separate rooms felt pointed. A reminder that despite whatever tension existed between them, they were maintaining boundaries. For now. The week before the conference, Ethan received an unexpected visitor at his office. Marcus Chen, one of the junior analysts he'd been mentoring, knocked hesitantly on his doorframe. "Got a minute?" Marcus asked. "Sure. Come in." Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk. Marcus was 24, fresh out of grad school, brilliant with data but rough around the edges professionally. "What's up?" Marcus sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to ask you something kind of personal. You can tell me to mind my own business if you want." "Okay." "A few months ago, you were struggling, like really struggling. I could see it even though you tried to hide it." Marcus twisted his hands together. "And then something changed. You got better, really fast. I was wondering, how did you do that?" Ethan studied the younger man carefully. "Why are you asking?" "Because I think I might be heading in the same direction. Not as bad yet, but..." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "My student loans are crushing me. I'm working side gigs just to cover rent. I'm not sleeping enough and I'm starting to make mistakes, and I don't know how to stop the spiral. There it was. The exact pattern Vivian had recognized in Ethan, the slow motion collapse that happened when talented people were drowning in circumstances beyond their control. Have you talked to anyone about this? Your supervisor? HR? Marcus shook his head. I'm afraid if I admit I'm struggling, they'll think I can't handle the job. I just got here. I can't already be failing. The words were so familiar they hurt. Ethan had said almost the exact same thing to himself 6 months ago. You're not failing, Ethan said firmly. You're dealing with external pressures that are affecting your work. That's different, and there are resources that can help. What resources? This was the moment. The chance to potentially bring Marcus into the mentorship program to offer him the same lifeline Vivian had offered Ethan. But he needed to clear it with Vivian first. Couldn't make promises without authorization. Give me 24 hours, Ethan said. I need to make a call. But Marcus, you did the right thing by coming to me. Don't let this eat at you in silence. After Marcus left, Ethan immediately went to Vivian's office. Her assistant tried to stop him. She was in a meeting, but Ethan insisted it was urgent. Vivian stepped out into the hallway, her expression concerned. What's wrong? Marcus Chen just came to my office. He's drowning financially. Student loans, can't make rent, working himself into the ground. I think he's a candidate for the mentorship program. Vivian's expression shifted from concerned to focused. Tell me everything. Ethan relayed the conversation. Vivian listened intently, asking questions about Marcus's work performance, his potential, the severity of his situation. All right, she said when he finished. I'll pull his file and review his performance metrics. If everything checks out, we can bring him in. Good catch, Ethan. He came to me because he noticed I got better. He wanted to know how. What did you tell him? That there were resources. I didn't mention the program specifically. That felt like your call to make. Vivian nodded approvingly. Smart. Let me do the vetting. If he's a fit, we'll bring him in next week. She paused. This is exactly the kind of early intervention the program is designed for. Catching people before they hit rock bottom instead of after. 3 days later, Marcus Chen became the 4th member of the mentorship program. Ethan sat in on the initial meeting where Vivian explained the offer, watched Marcus's face cycle through disbelief, hope, and overwhelming relief. It was like watching his own reaction in a mirror. Thank you, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't. You don't have to thank me yet, Vivian said. Thank me when you're thriving. For now, just accept the help and do the work. After Marcus left, Vivian turned to Ethan. You're going to be his primary mentor. I'll handle the executive oversight, but you'll do the weekly check-ins, help him navigate the program, be the person he can talk to when things get hard. Me? Are you sure? You've lived this. You know what he's going through better than I do, and you've demonstrated excellent judgment in identifying him as a candidate. Her expression softened slightly. Besides, helping others is part of your own recovery, Doctor. Morrison would probably tell you the same thing. She was right. Having purpose beyond his own survival, being able to give back in a meaningful way, it felt good. Felt like closing a circle. The day before the Colorado trip, Ethan met with David Chen for their regular financial check-in. His emergency fund was fully funded now, 6 months of expenses sitting safely in a high-yield savings account. His credit card debt was down to almost nothing. His student loans were on an aggressive repayment plan that would have them cleared in 5 years instead of 20. You've done remarkable work, David said, reviewing the spreadsheets. Honestly, some of the best financial recovery I've seen. You should be proud. I had excellent guidance, Ethan replied. Guidance only works if you follow it. Plenty of people get good advice and ignore it. David closed his laptop. So, what are your next goals? Now that we've handled the crisis management, we can start thinking bigger. They talked about retirement planning, investment strategies, maybe saving for a down payment on a house eventually, things that felt absurdly normal and achievable after months of just trying to survive. Walking out of that meeting, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost knocked him over. 6 months ago, he'd been 3 days from eviction. Now he was planning for retirement. The transformation was almost incomprehensible. He texted Vivian without thinking. Just finished with David. Can't believe how far I've come. Thank you for making this possible. Her response came 10 minutes later. You made it possible. I just helped clear the path. Safe travels tomorrow. See you at the airport. The flight to Denver left at 2 in the afternoon. Ethan arrived at the airport an hour early, checked his bag, and was heading toward security when he saw Vivian standing near the first-class check-in counter. She wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater instead of her usual suits, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked younger, less intimidating, almost approachable. Their eyes met across the terminal, and Ethan felt his heart kick against his ribs. This was happening. They were really doing this. Vivian gestured him over. They upgraded us both to first class, perk of booking through corporate travel. The flight was smooth and uneventful, but sitting beside Vivian in the spacious first-class seats felt intimate in a way their office interactions never did. They talked about work at first, the conference agenda, the presentation they'd be giving, networking strategies. But somewhere over Kansas, the conversation shifted. Can I ask you something personal? Ethan said. Vivian glanced at him, her expression guarded. You can ask. I might not answer. Your ex-fiancé, the one who went to prison. Do you ever think about him? She was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, not often anymore. Mostly I think about who I was when I was with him, how blind I was to what was happening, how I prioritized work over paying attention to my own life. Do you regret it? The relationship? I regret the ending, the betrayal, the financial devastation, the public humiliation when it all came out. She took a sip of her wine, but I don't regret the person it forced me to become. I learned things about myself in that collapse that I needed to learn. Like what? That I'm stronger than I thought, that asking for help isn't weakness, that the armor I wore to protect myself was also isolating me from genuine connection. Her eyes met his. Sound familiar? Very, Ethan admitted. They lapsed into comfortable silence. Outside the window, clouds stretched endlessly white and pure. Inside the plane, the muted conversations of other passengers and the steady hum of the engines created a bubble of privacy. What about you? Vivian asked. Do you think about Sarah? Less and less. I was angry for a long time, angry that she left, angry about the money, angry that she got to move on while I was drowning. He considered his words carefully. But now I mostly feel grateful. Grateful? That it ended before we got married. That I found out she wasn't the person I thought she was before we built even more of a life together. He turned to look at Vivian. And grateful that it led to this. To the program. To becoming someone better than I was. You were always good, Ethan. You just needed support to show it. The way she said his name sent warmth through his chest. Not Mr. Cole, like in the beginning. Not Ethan, in the brisk professional tone of their office meetings. Just his name, soft and personal. Vivian, he said, testing the intimacy of her first name instead of Ms. Hartwell. She smiled slightly. Yes? Are we going to talk about what happens this weekend? Away from the office? Away from all the normal rules? Her smile faded, replaced by something more serious. I don't know. What do you want to talk about? I want to know if this, he gestured between them, is real or if I'm imagining it. You're not imagining it. She set down her wine glass carefully. But that doesn't mean we should act on it. The complications, I know about the complications, the power dynamic, the professional risks, all of it. Ethan leaned slightly closer. But I also know that I've spent 6 months rebuilding my life, and for the first time in years, I feel like I know what I want. And part of what I want is to see where this could go. Vivian's breath caught slightly. Ethan, you don't have to decide anything now. I'm just being honest. You taught me that honesty matters more than pretending. She looked at him for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his face. This could get very complicated. Or it could be the best decision we ever make. You're an optimist now. When did that happen? Somewhere between getting my life back and realizing I have things worth being optimistic about. The plane began its descent into Denver. Through the window, Ethan could see the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance, snow-capped and magnificent. The conference hotel was in Boulder, nestled against the foothills with views that promised to be spectacular. They collected their luggage and took a shuttle to the hotel. The lobby was all exposed wood beams and stone fireplaces, upscale mountain chic. Check-in was efficient, and soon they were heading to their rooms on the fourth floor, separate rooms as promised, but only 3 doors apart. The welcome reception starts at 6, Vivian said, stopping at her door. Business casual dress code. I'll meet you in the lobby at 5:45. Sounds good. She unlocked her door, then paused. Ethan, for this weekend, let's just see what happens. No expectations, no pressure. Just be present. It was the most open she'd been about the possibility of something happening between them. I can do that. The welcome reception was crowded with executives from tech companies across the country, CEOs, CFOs, heads of HR and operations. Ethan felt out of place at first, young and undercredentialed compared to the power players filling the room. But Vivian introduced him confidently, framing him as her protege and the architect of the Kaufman success, and people's interest sharpened. Tell me about this predictive model, one CEO asked, a woman named Jennifer, who ran a logistics company in Atlanta. Ethan explained the system, fielding technical questions and discussing implementation challenges. Before long, he had a small crowd of interested executives, all wanting to know more about Meridian's innovative approach. Vivian watched from a few feet away, pride evident in her expression. When the crowd finally dispersed for dinner, she touched his elbow lightly. You're a natural at this, she said quietly. Networking, presenting, commanding a room, you've come so far. I had a good teacher. They sat together at dinner, at a table with other executives and their senior staff. The conversation ranged from industry trends to company culture to the challenges of modern leadership. Ethan held his own, contributing insights that earned nods of agreement and thoughtful responses. After dinner came drinks in the hotel bar, more networking, more conversation. Ethan nursed a bourbon and found himself genuinely enjoying the evening. The intellectual stimulation, the exchange of ideas, the feeling of belonging in spaces that once would have intimidated him. Around 10, the crowd started thinning. Vivian caught his eye across the room and tilted her head toward the exit. They said their goodbyes and headed for the elevators. That was exhausting, she said once they were alone in the elevator car. But productive. I think you made some valuable connections. So did you. That CEO from the Seattle tech firm seemed very interested in the mentorship program. Marcus Chen. He's dealing with high turnover and wants to explore retention strategies. The elevator doors opened on their floor. Tomorrow's presentation is going to be crucial. They walked down the hallway together, the plush carpet muffling their footsteps. At Vivian's door, they both stopped. Good night, Ethan, she said, but she didn't move to unlock her door. Good night, he replied, also not moving. The hallway was quiet, just the two of them, and the soft lighting and the awareness that hung between them like a living thing. We should be sensible about this, Vivian said, but her voice lacked conviction. We should, Ethan agreed. Neither of them moved. The tension was almost unbearable, the pull toward each other magnetic and undeniable. Finally, Vivian let out a breath that might have been a laugh. This is ridiculous. We're adults. Very adult, Ethan said. Go to your room, Ethan. Is that what you want? She closed her eyes briefly. What I want and what we should do are not the same thing. Then tell me what you want. Be honest. When she opened her eyes, they were blazing with something that made his pulse race. I want you to stop being professional and perfect and appropriate. I want to stop pretending I don't think about you outside of Tuesday morning meetings. I want... She cut herself off, her jaw tightening. What? Ethan pressed. What do you want? This, she said, and kissed him. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was decisive and fierce and full of months of suppressed wanting. Ethan responded instantly, his hands coming up to frame her face, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Vivian's eyes were wide with something between shock and exhilaration. That was inappropriate, she said. Very, Ethan agreed. We should stop. Probably. She kissed him again, harder this time, and Ethan stopped thinking about consequences or complications or anything except the feel of her against him, the taste of wine on her lips, the small sound she made when his hands moved to her waist. They stumbled into her room somehow, the door closing behind them with a decisive click. Vivian pushed him against it, her hands fisting in his shirt. "This changes everything," she said against his mouth. "I know." "We'll have to tell HR. There are disclosure forms, potential reassignments." "Vivian?" "What?" "Stop talking about HR." She laughed, breathless and genuine, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "Fair enough." They moved deeper into the room, shedding professional distance along with their carefully maintained boundaries. Whatever happened next, whatever complications arose, Ethan knew this moment was worth it. Worth the risk, worth the uncertainty, worth everything. Because for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt completely, perfectly alive. Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the hotel room. Ethan woke slowly, disoriented for a moment before the events of the previous night came rushing back. He was in Vivian's room, in Vivian's bed, and she was still asleep beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen during their professional interactions. Reality hit him like cold water. They'd crossed every line that existed between them. The mentor-mentee relationship, the boss-employee dynamic, the carefully maintained professional distance, all of it shattered in a few hours of honesty and wanting. Ethan's first instinct was panic. What had they done? How would they walk this back? But looking at Vivian's sleeping face, he found he didn't want to walk it back. Didn't regret it. The complications were real, but so was this connection between them. Vivian's eyes opened, gray and clear and immediately alert. She looked at him for a long moment without speaking. "Morning," Ethan said quietly. "Morning." She didn't move away, didn't pull the professional mask back on. "We need to talk about this." "I know." She sat up, pulling the sheet with her, and Ethan could see her brain already working through scenarios and consequences. This can't be a secret. The power dynamic makes secrecy dangerous, for both of us, but especially for you. "I agree. We'll need to disclose to HR as soon as we're back. There are protocols for workplace relationships, especially when there's a supervisory element." Her voice was businesslike, but her hand found his under the sheets. "They might require one of us to transfer departments or report to someone else." "Whatever needs to happen, we'll handle it." Ethan squeezed her hand. "I'm not walking away from this just because it's complicated." Something in her expression softened. "You're sure? Because once we disclose, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know. There will be gossip, speculation, probably some people who think you slept your way to success." "Let them think whatever they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. My work speaks for itself." Vivian studied him carefully. "You really have changed. 6 months ago, you would have been terrified of what people thought." 6 months ago, I was terrified of everything." He reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "You helped me find my courage. I'm not going to lose it now." She kissed him softly, and it felt different from the fierce urgency of the night before. Gentler, but somehow more meaningful. A promise instead of just passion. "We still have to get through today's presentation," she said when they broke apart. "Can we table the personal stuff until after the conference? I need to be focused." "We can do that." They separated to their own rooms to shower and change. Ethan stood under the hot water for a long time, trying to organize his thoughts. Everything was different now. Not in a bad way, but in a way that would require navigation and honesty and probably some difficult conversations. He thought about Dr. Morrison, about what she'd said regarding feelings and actions and consent. They were both adults, both aware of the complications, both choosing this with open eyes. That had to count for something. The conference breakfast was crowded with executives comparing notes from the previous evening's networking. Ethan found Vivian at a table near the windows, already reviewing her presentation notes. She looked up when he approached, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, understanding, connection. "Sleep well?" she asked, her tone professional, but her eyes warm. "Very well, thanks." Patricia joined them a few minutes later, chattering about the contacts she'd made and the potential clients she'd identified. If she noticed anything different between Ethan and Vivian, she didn't mention it. The morning sessions were standard conference fare, panels on leadership trends, workshops on organizational culture, networking breaks with expensive coffee and mediocre pastries. Ethan attended dutifully, taking notes and making connections, but his mind kept drifting to the afternoon session where he and Vivian would be presenting the mentorship program. At noon, they had a working lunch in a small conference room to finalize their presentation. Just the two of them, reviewing slides and rehearsing talking points. "You'll open with your story," Vivian said, clicking through the PowerPoint. "Keep it factual but emotional. These executives need to understand the human cost of ignoring struggling employees." "How much detail do you want me to share?" "Enough to be compelling. You were engaged, experienced financial collapse, ended up barely functional while hiding it from everyone. Then the intervention happened and you transformed. Hit those beats without getting lost in the weeds." Ethan nodded. Speaking about his lowest point to a room full of strangers was daunting, but it was also important. If his story could convince even one CEO to implement a similar program, it was worth the vulnerability. "And you'll follow with the data," he said, moving to the next slide. "ROI calculations, retention metrics, productivity improvements." "Right. We give them the emotional hook, then prove it makes business sense. Hearts and minds." Vivian looked up from the laptop. "You nervous?" "A little. More excited than nervous, though." "Good. Use that energy." She closed the laptop. "Ethan, about last night, we said we'd table it until after the conference." "I know, but I need you to understand something." She turned to face him fully. "What happened between us, it wasn't just physical. I have real feelings for you. Feelings that started developing months ago, even though I tried to suppress them. This isn't casual for me." His heart squeezed. "It's not casual for me either." "Then we're on the same page. We'll deal with the professional complications together, but I want you to know where I stand." "Where we stand," he corrected. She smiled, quick and genuine. "Where we stand." The afternoon session was in the main ballroom, set up theater style with about 200 executives in attendance. Ethan stood backstage with Vivian, his heart pounding but his mind clear. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." They walked out together to polite applause. Vivian went first, introducing herself in Meridian Analytics, establishing credibility. Then she turned the presentation over to Ethan. He stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. CEOs and executives and leaders who held the power to change lives, for better or worse. "6 months ago," Ethan began, his voice steady, "I was 3 days away from eviction. I was living on instant noodles and black coffee, losing weight I couldn't afford to lose, making mistakes at work because I was too exhausted to think straight. My fiancé had left me, taken half our savings, and I was drowning in debt I couldn't pay. I was, by any objective measure, failing at life." The room was silent, attentive. He had their attention. "I hid it from everyone. Came to work every day with a smile plastered on my face, pretending everything was fine while I was quietly falling apart. I thought asking for help would mean admitting weakness, and weakness meant losing my job. So I just kept pushing, kept grinding, kept trying to work harder as if effort alone could solve problems that required resources I didn't have." He clicked to the next slide, a graph showing his performance metrics from that period. The steady decline was obvious. This is what drowning looks like in corporate metrics. Missed deadlines, declining quality, increased errors. Most companies see this pattern and think the employee is checked out or incompetent. The solution is typically termination. He paused. "I was 1 week away from being fired when my CEO, Vivian Hartwell, pulled me aside and offered me something different." He told them about the program, the salary adjustment, the counseling, the financial planning, the mentorship. He showed them his performance metrics from the last 4 months, the dramatic upward trajectory. Then he told them about the Kaufman account, about landing an $8 million client and building innovative solutions. "That's the same person," he said, pointing between the two sets of graphs. "Same brain, same skills, same potential. The only difference is support. When I had the resources to address my actual problems, the financial crisis, the mental health struggles, the isolation, I could finally use my abilities effectively." Vivian took over then, walking through the business case, the cost of the program versus the cost of turnover and lost productivity. The ROI calculations that showed every dollar invested in struggling employees returned $3 in value. The retention statistics, the satisfaction surveys, the expansion plans. This isn't charity, Vivian said firmly. This is smart business. We're not saving failing employees. We're preventing good employees from failing in the first place. There's a difference. The Q&A session that followed was intense. Executives asked about implementation costs, about how to identify candidates, about potential abuse of the system, about metrics and outcomes and scalability. Ethan and Vivian fielded every question with data and examples and honest acknowledgement of challenges. A CEO from a manufacturing company in Detroit raised his hand. How do you prevent this from becoming an entitlement? From employees expecting bailouts whenever they make poor financial decisions? Ethan answered before Vivian could. The program requires participation in counseling and financial planning. It's not just throwing money at problems, it's teaching people how to manage resources and address root causes. We're investing in their long-term success, not enabling dependency. And candidly, the kind of employee who would abuse this system probably isn't someone you want to invest in anyway. We're looking for people with genuine potential who are facing genuine hardship. The CEO nodded thoughtfully. Fair point. When the session ended, they received sustained applause. Executives lined up afterward with business cards and questions about consulting services and requests for more detailed information about program implementation. Marcus Chen, the CEO from Seattle who'd talked to Vivian the night before, approached with enthusiasm. That was powerful, really powerful. I want to implement something similar at my company. Can we set up a call next week to discuss specifics? Absolutely, Vivian said, handing him her card. I'll have my assistant coordinate. They spent the next hour networking, answering questions, making connections. By the time the room finally cleared, Ethan felt wrung out but exhilarated. That went well, Vivian said, gathering her materials. Better than well. I think we just opened a new revenue stream for Meridian, consulting on employee development programs. We make a good team. She looked at him, and the professional distance slipped again. Yes, we do. The evening reception was celebratory. Word had spread about their presentation, and multiple executives approached Ethan to praise his courage in sharing his story. Patricia was over the moon about the business opportunities they'd generated. Do you know how many potential clients asked about our services? She said, slightly drunk on champagne and success. This conference has already paid for itself 10 times over. Around 9, Vivian caught Ethan's eye and gestured toward the exit. They slipped away from the party, walking out into the cool Colorado evening. The hotel had a terrace overlooking the mountains, and they stood at the railing, looking out at the peaks silhouetted against the darkening sky. I'm proud of you, Vivian said quietly. What you did today, sharing your story like that, it took real courage. I learned from the best. She turned to face him. We need to talk about what happens when we get back. I know. I'll call HR first thing Monday morning. Request a meeting to disclose the relationship. They'll probably require you to report to Patricia instead of me, at least for performance reviews and evaluations. We'll need to establish clear boundaries between personal and professional. I can handle that. There's going to be gossip, speculation. Some people will assume I promoted you because of personal reasons, not merit. My work speaks for itself. The Kaufman account, the presentation today, those are objective achievements. I know that, but perception matters. We need to be prepared for judgment. Ethan took her hand, threading their fingers together. So we'll be prepared. Together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression soft. When did you become so certain about everything? Somewhere between survival mode and actually living. You helped me find that certainty. We helped each other find it. They stood there in the mountain air, hands linked, looking out at the vast darkness punctuated by distant lights. The conference had gone better than either of them could have hoped. The program was validated, expanding, potentially transforming how other companies approached employee development. And this thing between them, complicated, risky, real, was out in the open now. Do you regret it? Ethan asked. Last night? No, do you? Not even a little. Vivian smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way her professional smiles never did. Good. Because I don't do casual, Ethan. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Full disclosure, proper boundaries, honest communication. I wouldn't want it any other way. They went back to her room that night, but slower, more deliberate, less urgency and more intention. And when Ethan woke up the next morning with Vivian curled against him, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The flight home Sunday afternoon was quiet. Patricia sat several rows behind them, buried in her laptop, organizing all the new business leads. Ethan and Vivian sat together, ostensibly reviewing conference notes, actually just being present with each other. Nervous about tomorrow? Vivian asked. A little, mostly just ready to get it over with. HR will be professional, probably a bit bureaucratic, but they'll handle it appropriately. And then? And then we figure out how to make this work. The relationship, the professional boundaries, all of it. She glanced at him. I don't have all the answers, Ethan. This is new territory for me, too. We'll figure it out together. Monday morning, Vivian called him at 7. HR meeting is at 10, conference room B, both of us. I'll be there. The meeting was with Jennifer Walsh, head of HR, and her deputy, Michael Torres. They were professional and efficient, asking direct questions about when the relationship started, whether there had been any coercion or pressure, how they planned to manage conflicts of interest. To be clear, Jennifer said, reviewing her notes, Miss Hartwell, you are currently Mr. Cole's direct supervisor? For the mentorship program, yes. His official supervisor for performance reviews is Patricia Henderson. But you have significant influence over his career trajectory. I do, Vivian acknowledged, which is why we're here. We want to establish appropriate boundaries and safeguards. Michael pulled up a document on his tablet. We have protocols for this. Given the power dynamic, we recommend that Mr. Cole be formally reassigned to report exclusively to Ms. Henderson. Ms. Hartwell can continue to oversee the mentorship program, but all performance evaluations, promotion decisions, and salary adjustments for Mr. Cole will go through Ms. Henderson and require approval from at least one other executive. That's acceptable, Vivian said. Mr. Cole, Jennifer asked, do you have any concerns about this arrangement? No, it makes sense to have clear separation between personal and professional. They went through additional protocols: disclosure to their immediate teams, recusal from certain decisions, annual reviews of the arrangement to ensure no conflicts had developed. It was thorough and slightly awkward, but necessary. One more thing, Jennifer said as they were wrapping up. There will likely be gossip. Office relationships, especially between different levels of hierarchy, always generate talk. How you choose to handle that is up to you, but I'd recommend being matter-of-fact about it. Don't hide, but don't overshare. Understood, Ethan said. After the meeting, Vivian walked him back toward his office. Well, that's done. Official and documented. How do you feel? Relieved, mostly. I don't like secrecy. She paused outside his door. I need to tell Patricia myself, before the rumor mill does. Makes sense. And you should probably tell your team, Marcus especially. He looks up to you. Ethan nodded. The conversation with Marcus would be important. He didn't want the younger analyst to think the mentorship program was just a way for Vivian to recruit romantic partners. Patricia took the news with surprising equanimity. I had a feeling something was developing, she said when Vivian told her later that day. The way you two looked at each other during the Colorado presentation, it was pretty obvious to anyone paying attention. You're not concerned about impropriety? Are you asking me as my boss or as someone wanting honest feedback? Honest feedback. Patricia leaned back in her chair. I think you two are adults who made an adult decision. I've watched Ethan's transformation over the past 6 months, and it's been because of his own work, not favoritism. The Kaufman account was earned, not given. If anything, you held him to higher standards than you held other employees. I did, Vivian admitted. So no, I'm not concerned. As long as the proper protocols are in place, which HR is handling, I think you should both be happy. Patricia smiled. Life's too short to avoid good things just because they're complicated. Marcus Chen's reaction was different. When Ethan told him that afternoon, the younger analyst looked stricken. Wait, so you and Ms. Hartwell are together? Like, romantically? Yes. We disclosed to HR this morning. I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. Did the mentorship program happen because she was interested in you? No, the program existed before anything personal developed. Our relationship started months after I joined the program, and we didn't act on it until last weekend. But she picked you for the program because I was drowning and she recognized the pattern from her own experience. The selection criteria had nothing to do with attraction. Ethan leaned forward. Marcus, I need you to understand something. The program is legitimate. Your inclusion has nothing to do with my relationship with Vivian. You were selected because you're talented and struggling and worth investing in. That's it. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, I believe you. It's just weird, you know. She's the CEO. I know it's weird, trust me, I know. But it's also real, and we're handling it as professionally as possible. Is she going to bring other people into the program? Or was it just you and now me? There are already 4 people in the program, and she's planning to expand to at least 5 more. This isn't about personal relationships, Marcus. It's about changing how the company supports employees who are struggling. The younger analyst seemed to relax. That's good, because this program, it's saving my life. I don't want it to be anything other than what you said it was. It's exactly what I said it was. The gossip started by Wednesday. Ethan heard the whispers in the break room, saw the glances when he and Vivian were in the same meeting. Most of it was curiosity rather than malice, but there were a few pointed comments about sleeping your way to promotion. Kelly approached him Thursday afternoon, closing his office door behind her. People are talking, she said bluntly. I know. Some of it's not nice. There are rumors that you only got the Kaufman account because you're sleeping with the boss. Ethan felt a flash of anger but tamped it down. The Kaufman project started before Vivian and I were involved. The timeline doesn't even support that theory. I know that. Anyone who actually pays attention knows that. But people like drama more than they like facts. Kelly sat down across from him. How are you holding up? I'm fine. The gossip is annoying, but it'll die down once something more interesting happens. And you and Vivian? You're really doing this? We're really doing this. Kelly studied him carefully. You look happy. Happier than I've ever seen you, actually. So whatever people say, hold on to that. The following Tuesday, Ethan had his first official meeting with Vivian as program participants rather than supervisor and employee. They met in the small conference room at 7 a.m., just like always, but the dynamic had shifted. How are you handling the gossip? She asked. Better than I expected. Most people are just curious. A few are judgmental, but their opinions don't really matter. Good. I've had a few raised eyebrows from the board, but nothing serious. The Kaufman success and the conference response bought us a lot of goodwill. They talked about the program expansion, about the 3 new candidates Ethan had identified, about the consulting opportunities that were developing from companies who'd seen their presentation. The conversation was professional and productive, but there was an ease between them now that hadn't existed before. Dinner tonight? Vivian asked as they were wrapping up. My place. I'll actually cook something instead of ordering takeout. You cook? When I have time and motivation. Turns out I have both now. Ethan smiled. I'd like that. Over the next few months, they settled into a rhythm. Ethan reported to Patricia for performance issues, worked closely with Vivian on the mentorship program expansion, and built his own career on merit. He took on more responsibility, mentored junior analysts, and contributed to business development. The mentorship program grew to encompass 8 employees, each with their own story of struggle and recovery. Marcus Chen thrived under the support, his work improving dramatically. 2 other analysts joined, along with someone from accounting, someone from marketing, and a software developer who'd been dealing with medical debt from a family emergency. Each success validated the program further. Each transformation demonstrated that investing in people during their lowest points could yield extraordinary returns. In June, Vivian called an all-hands meeting to announce a major initiative. We're creating a formal employee wellness and development department, she said, addressing the entire company via video conference. This department will oversee not just the mentorship program, but expanded mental health resources, financial planning services, and career development opportunities for all employees. We're committing 5% of our annual budget to this initiative because we believe our people are our greatest asset. The announcement was met with applause and genuine enthusiasm. Ethan watched from the back of the room, proud of what they'd built together. After the meeting, the board called Vivian to express their approval. The program had reduced turnover by 30%, increased productivity metrics across the board, and generated positive press that enhanced Meridian's reputation as an employer. Several other companies had contracted for consulting services, creating a new revenue stream. You were right, the board chair told Vivian. Investing in people was smart business. That evening, Ethan and Vivian celebrated at her apartment. She'd made pasta from scratch, and they ate on her balcony overlooking the city lights. "We did it," she said, raising her wine glass. "Built something that matters. You did it. I just helped. We did it together. Don't diminish your role." She set down her glass. "I have something to tell you." Ethan's heart skipped. "What?" "I've been offered a position, CEO of a major tech company in San Francisco. Significant salary increase, huge opportunity." She paused. "I turned it down." "What? Why?" "Because what we're building here matters more than a title upgrade. The mentorship program, the cultural shift at Meridian, the consulting work. This is legacy stuff, Ethan. This changes lives." She reached across the table to take his hand. "And because my life is here, you're here. I'm not interested in starting over somewhere else when everything I want is right here." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You turned down a major opportunity for this? For us?" "I turned it down because this is where I want to be. The opportunity, the program, the relationship, all of it. I'm choosing this life intentionally." "I love you," Ethan said, the words coming out before he'd planned them. "I know we haven't said it yet, but I love you, and I need you to know that." Vivian's eyes brightened with tears. "I love you too. Have for months, probably. I just didn't want to say it until I was sure we could make this work. We're making it work. We are." They moved inside as the evening cooled, curling up on her couch with coffee and comfortable silence. Ethan thought about the man he'd been 9 months ago, desperate, drowning, certain his life was over. That man couldn't have imagined this. Success, stability, love, purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked. "How far we've both come. How that night at the holiday party changed everything." She smiled. "When I cornered you in the bathroom and you thought I was going to fire you? When you saw me clearly enough to know I needed help, even when I was hiding it from everyone, including myself." "We saw each other," she corrected. "I recognized your struggle because I'd lived it. You recognized my loneliness because you'd lived it. Sometimes the best connections come from shared understanding of pain. And then we build something better together." "Exactly." The company picnic in August was the unofficial debut of their relationship to the wider Meridian community. They'd been dating for 6 months by then, and while people knew, they'd kept things relatively private. But at the picnic, Vivian's hand found his during the group photo, and that simple gesture said everything. The picture ended up in the company newsletter. Vivian Hartwell and Ethan Cole, along with the rest of the leadership team, smiling at the camera. No hiding, no shame, just two people who'd found each other through unlikely circumstances and built something real. Patricia pulled Ethan aside during the picnic. "You two look happy." "We are." "Good. You both deserve it." She paused. "I'm recommending you for VP of Analytics when Robert retires next year. Your work has been exceptional, and you've demonstrated real leadership with the junior analysts." Ethan's eyes widened. "VP? That's earned. Completely earned. And before you worry about appearances, this recommendation is going through proper channels with multiple executives signing off. Nobody can claim it's favoritism." He'd come so far from the struggling analyst who could barely make rent. Now he was being considered for vice president. The transformation was almost incomprehensible. That night, he told Vivian about the VP recommendation. She smiled with pure pride. "You've earned that 10 times over. I'm not surprised. It feels surreal." "It's real. You're just not used to success yet." She pulled him closer. "Get used to it. You're going to have a lot more of it." In October, Meridian's quarterly earnings report included a special section on the Employee Wellness and Development Program. The metrics were undeniable. Retention up, productivity up, employee satisfaction scores the highest they'd ever been. The program had expanded to 15 participants, with plans to offer scaled versions of the support services to all employees. The business press noticed. Articles appeared in major publications about Meridian's innovative approach to employee development, often featuring interviews with Vivian about the philosophy behind the program. She always mentioned that the idea came from her own experience and was refined through working with employees like Ethan Cole, whose transformation demonstrated the program's potential. When asked directly about her relationship with Ethan during one interview, Vivian was matter-of-fact. Yes, we're in a relationship. We disclosed it to HR, established appropriate professional boundaries, and have maintained those boundaries consistently. Our personal relationship developed after his participation in the mentorship program began and has no bearing on his professional achievements, which are extensive and well documented. The interview ran with the headline, CEO Vivian Hartwell on investing in people and finding love in unexpected places. It was respectful and focused on the program's success, mentioning their relationship only as context for their professional partnership. Ethan framed a copy of the article and hung it in his office, not because of the relationship mention, but because of the quote from Vivian. Sometimes the best business decisions are also the most human ones. Treating employees like people instead of resources isn't just ethical, it's profitable. In December, exactly 1 year after the holiday party where everything changed, Meridian hosted another company celebration. Ethan stood in the same hotel ballroom, wearing a better suit and carrying himself with confidence instead of desperation. Vivian found him near the bar, stunning in a deep blue dress. "Thinking about last year?" she asked. "Hard not to? Same place? Completely different person." "Not completely different. The core of who you are hasn't changed. You just have support now, resources, the ability to be your best self." Marcus Chen approached, grinning. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Hartwell, great party." "How are you doing, Marcus?" Vivian asked. "Really well. Paid off my credit cards last month, started saving for a house. My work on the Jennings account got mentioned in the quarterly report." His enthusiasm was infectious. "This program changed my life. I just wanted to say thank you." After he walked away, Ethan turned to Vivian. "That's what it's all about, isn't it? Giving people the chance to succeed?" "That's everything." The DJ started playing slow music, and couples drifted onto the dance floor. Vivian raised an eyebrow at Ethan. "Dance with me? In front of everyone?" "In front of everyone. No more hiding, remember?" They moved onto the floor together, and Ethan was aware of people watching, but he didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see that the struggling analyst and the fearsome CEO had found something worth celebrating. As they swayed to the music, Vivian spoke quietly. "I have something for you. It's not my birthday. I know, but it's the anniversary of the day I gave you that folder in the bathroom, the day everything changed." She pulled a small box from her clutch. "Open it later, in private." Ethan slipped the box into his pocket, his heart pounding. It was too small to be anything but jewelry, and the implications made his breath catch. They finished the dance, mingled with colleagues, celebrated the company's successful year. But Ethan's hand kept drifting to his pocket, feeling the shape of the box through the fabric. Later that night, back at Vivian's apartment, he finally opened it. Inside was a key on a simple silver keychain. "It's to my place," Vivian said, watching his face. "I know we've been taking things slow, being careful about boundaries, but I want you here, officially, not just overnight visits, but actually living together. You want me to move in? I want to build a life with you. A real one, not compartmentalized into professional and personal. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to combine our books and argue about whose furniture is better and figure out how to share closet space." She stepped closer. "What do you think?" Ethan looked at the key in his palm, at this symbol of permanence and trust and future. A year ago, he'd had nothing. No home, no hope, no belief that life could be anything but struggle. Now he had everything. "I think yes," he said, pulling her close. "Absolutely yes." They kissed, and it felt like sealing a promise, not just about moving in together, but about continuing to build this life they'd created from the ruins of their separate struggles. The mentorship program continued to expand, helping more employees find their footing during difficult times. Ethan was promoted to VP of Analytics in March, a position he earned through undeniable merit and excellent work. He became Vivian's partner in developing the consulting side of the business, traveling to other companies to help them implement similar programs. Together, they presented at conferences, wrote articles, and advocated for a more human approach to business leadership. The message was simple but powerful. Investing in people during their lowest points wasn't charity. It was the smartest business decision a company could make. 2 years after that first holiday party, Ethan stood in front of a different hotel ballroom, this time as a keynote speaker at a national HR conference. He told his story again, the struggle, the intervention, the transformation. But now he also told Vivian's story, with her permission. How she'd recognized his pattern because she'd lived it herself. How she'd built a program from her own pain and turned it into something that changed lives. In the audience, Vivian watched with pride. The program they'd built together had helped 43 employees across multiple companies. Ethan's success story had been replicated dozens of times, each one proving that people were worth investing in, even at their lowest points. After the presentation, an executive from a Fortune 500 company approached Ethan. "That was powerful," she said. "My company has been struggling with retention and burnout. I'd like to hire Meridian to help us implement a similar program." It was the largest consulting contract they'd landed yet, potentially transforming how a company with 50,000 employees approached human capital management. That night, Ethan and Vivian celebrated in their shared apartment, the space that had become truly theirs over the past year and a half. "We're changing the world," Vivian said, curled against him on the couch. "One company at a time, one employee at a time. Actually making a difference. You started it. That night you pulled me into the bathroom instead of firing me. We built it together. Your story, my framework, our combined determination to make sure other people don't have to suffer the way we did." She looked up at him. "I'm proud of us, of everything we've created." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights through the windows. Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, from desperation to hope, from isolation to connection, from barely surviving to genuinely thriving. The program that started as a secret conversation in a locked bathroom had become a movement, a model. Proof that compassion could be smart business, that investing in people during their struggles could yield extraordinary returns. But more than that, it had become their shared purpose, their combined legacy. The thing they'd built together from understanding, from shared pain, from the belief that people deserved second chances and support and the opportunity to be their best selves. And somewhere in the middle of building that legacy, they'd built a life together too. One founded on honesty, mutual respect, and the deep understanding that came from having both survived their own darkest moments. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where everything was perfect and simple. It was something better, something real. A partnership built on equal footing, with all complications acknowledged and addressed. A relationship that existed in full sunlight, disclosed and documented and completely genuine. The story that began with a desperate man and a fearsome CEO in a hotel bathroom had become something neither of them could have predicted. A program that changed corporate culture, a consulting business that spread that change to other companies, and a love story that proved vulnerability could be strength and asking for help could lead to transformation. Ethan Cole had learned to stop merely surviving and start actually living. Vivian Hartwell had learned that the armor she wore to protect herself didn't have to prevent genuine connection. Together, they'd learned that the best things in life often came from the most unlikely places, from seeing each other clearly in moments of struggle, from having the courage to help and be helped, from building something meaningful from the ruins of their separate pasts. As Vivian fell asleep against his shoulder, Ethan felt a contentment he'd never experienced before. This was home. This was purpose. This was the life he'd stopped believing was possible, now fully real and completely his. And it all started because one person looked at another's drowning and chose to throw a lifeline instead of looking away. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything.